Welcome to the SeizeYourBusiness.com podcast and video blog. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law. Jim Waszak, my radio partner, couldn't make it today, but I'm joined today by Steve Eschbach from Transworld Business Advisors, and our topic is going to be, we're going to talk pretty generally about business purchasing, because that's what Steve's wheelhouse is. So specifically a little bit about executives in transition and how business purchases might be an option that they hadn't thought about. So Steve, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Kevin, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and Transworld Business Advisors.
Well, my previous background was primarily a financial executive in investor relations, and my role with the publicly traded companies that I worked for was to assist C-level executives, chief executive officers, chief financial officers, be clear, concise, confident, convincing, and compassionate about the story of the company they represent. So the C-level executives primarily meet with institutional investors on Wall Street, and they want to be able to understand what the investment merits of their company is or are, and to essentially kind of tell that story as succinctly as they can, as convincingly as they can. And over the course of the years, I have been transitioned out of executive roles due to mergers and acquisitions or a change in management team. And up until 2015, I was looking for that next corporate executive role. And as I was doing my business development and career development, job search networking, I came across United Franchise Group. And they asked me the question, Steve, have you ever thought about owning your own business? And I had. I actually developed an investor relations and public relations firm back in 2006, and I started one up again in 2015. But they presented the Transworld Business Advisor franchise to me, and it made a lot of sense. So instead of working with C-level executives on telling the story of the investment merits of the company that they are representing, I'm now working with local business owners, helping them to prepare their business for sale as they develop their exit strategy. They want to move on for whatever reason it is, retirement, maybe they want to pursue other activities. So my role is to help the business owner prepare their businesses for sale so we can help them sell it confidentially.
So what are the steps that go into you helping someone prepare their business for sale? Can you kind of break down in broad terms, what the phases of that
Well,
look like?
Primarily what we do is we try to get as much information as we can to describe the business to prospective buyers. Now, as you probably know, most businesses do not put a for sale sign up in front of their store. They want to do it confidentially for a variety of reasons. One of them, of course, is to make sure that the employees are not getting scared and might want to move on because the entity might not be here. So what we try to do is develop a very succinct, vague ad that we put on various sites. So Transworld Business Advisors of Naperville obviously has a website, but we work with about 6 or 7 other internet services such as BizBuySell and BizQuest, and there are a few others. So we advertise it through these internet sources, and prospective buyers comb through those rather religiously, and we usually get an inquiry on one of the listings that we have. And at that time, what we want to do is give the prospective buyer, after they sign a confidentiality agreement, the most information we can about the business. So if you own a business, you've got 3 years or more of financial information, that is going to do you a world of good, because that'll give the prospective buyer, a trend to look at to determine what is the best selling price for that business, what they'd be willing to offer. Now, we do the same thing with the business owner before we put it up for sale, even though we list it as vaguely as possible so they can't identify what the name of the store is, what the business is, where it's located. But when we do get that prospective buyer, that's where they're going to hone in on, what is your equipment that you have? How many employees do you have? What are your revenues? What's your net income? What is your owner's discretionary earnings that you take out of the business? All this information is essential for not only pricing a business, but also what the buyer is looking for in terms of presenting an offer to you.
I've never gone through a business, well, actually, I kind of have, but as a passive investor, so I haven't been boots on the ground with it, but I've never been the active investor in a business sale. I've always imagined that you prepare something like a business plan that kind of lays out all of the aspects of your business and details your systems, and is that am I correct about that, or what's the work that goes into making a business sellable as opposed to just earning income?
Well, as I said, Transworld Business Advisors is a franchise that's been around for 35 years. Someone in my position, that was the way to go because they have established processes in place. So they have what they call a seller's interview. It's a very brief, but it includes information you need to tell about your business. Like, for example, what is your competition out there? What makes you different from the rest of the pack? So if you own I don't know, let's say you own a restaurant. Why would someone come to your restaurant versus going to another restaurant? So you want to be able to tell the prospective buyer or the audience for prospective buyers, what is your unique characteristic and why are you different from the others? Why would someone want to buy your product or your services as opposed to someone else's? And you want to be able to explain that to the prospective buyer. They're going to want to know what the competitive landscape is, what the pros are, what the cons are. And if you can establish that and clearly identify what those are, then your business is going to be very easy to sell.
Now, I've heard that a lot of businesses, like a law firm or a dental practice, can be cults of personality around the owner, and they're much more sellable if the owner can kind of take him or herself out of the business and have basically written systems in place and that employees are following. Do you help people kind of prepare their business in that way? Basically, take it from I'm just going in every day and working, and everything is being held together by duct tape, to I have a machine that's making money and has a blueprint, and it's more valuable to buyers? Or is that something you kind of refer out to other people?
No, we do that. We do prepare the owner for that possible question. And it's not possible, it's probable question, because the buyers are going to understand what systems are in place that's going to maximize the efficiency of the businesses that they operate. So if it's a business that, as you described, needs a little duct tape, well, we want to make sure that duct tape is in order and covered up with whatever it is, though it looks like a real business. Those become a little problematic to sell, and we would definitely, as a business broker, advise them on what they need to do to get themselves ready to sell their business. So we do try to help them out as much as possible. And sometimes when the seller wants to sell the business, maybe this time is not right because their systems aren't in place. So there's a prospective client that I have who doesn't have 2017 financial information yet, and we're already into September. So while we can still list the business and we can price it, I have to tell the seller that be prepared for the buyer wanting to look at the most recent financial information, because a business is valued up to the minute of the day the transaction takes place. And trend lines are important, profitability is important, how much the owner takes out of the business is all important. So we want to be able to clearly identify that so it's recognizable to the prospective buyer. Those are the easier sales. If you're scrambling to put that information together, you're going to have a tough time selling your business. So we try to advise them based on what the buyer's perspective is going to be, because that's what you want to be prepared for. When I was doing investor relations, we always prepared the C-level executives for what the investment analyst wanted to ask the C-level executive. Same thing applies with selling your business. We want to make sure that the seller is prepared for the buyer inquiries, because you're talking about a due diligence process that's going to be dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and they want to make sure everything is there because they're paying a value for a prospective earnings flow going forward.
Yeah, I would assume that at least at a bare minimum you'd have to have your financials up to date. That doesn't shock me. Right. Am I overestimating the effect that having an operating manual for all your different aspects of your business has? Or if I have a going concern and I've got my financials in place and I'm showing a profit and trending in the right direction, is that really good enough, or is it worth the time investment to prepare the operating manual?
Well, I'll tell you that Transworld Business Advisors, being a franchise, they do have an operating manual, and that's already prepared by the franchisor. Clearly, the more information you have dedicated to written material, the better your business is going to be. In certain circumstances, it's critical. In some other circumstances, it's not. Do you need an operating manual for a restaurant? Basically, you understand what the menu is, what products you're offering, or what meals you're offering. Does an operating manual make sense in that case? Maybe not as much so as a light manufacturing facility might need a process manual to make sure that you're manufacturing the right sequence and your raw materials are in place and everything is like Six Sigma. You want to make sure that the efficiency of the operation is there. In that case, an operations manual would be very beneficial.
Okay, so for a service industry sort of business, or something that it's not really a unique sort of product, right. An operating manual it's not a necessary prerequisite to necessarily sell the business.
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing you have to be aware of, too, is that if the business is going to be financeable, the financial statements and the income tax returns are going to be critical because most banks really rely on that information for determining whether it's a lendable business transaction. And the other thing that's very attractive, too, is if the business owner is willing to do what they call owner financing. So basically, the owner takes a note and still has a vested interest in the business because he or she wants to make sure that business is going to succeed. So by lending money from the seller, the former owner, that demonstrates that he has a commitment to making sure that business is still going to be operating on a viable basis.
How do you go about determining valuation before, there's a lot of different ways to do a business valuation, but when you're like kind of just someone presents, hey, here's my business, do you have a thumbnail, like here's our rule of thumb, and then it may deviate based on industry? Or?
Well, that's exactly the case. So you can look at selling a business kind of like selling real estate. So there are similarities. Now, selling residential real estate, there is a for sale sign. People will drive by and ask about that. That doesn't happen with a business because you don't want to advertise it's for sale. But there are rules of thumb depending on the industry you're in. So if you're an ice cream store, you do comparables. So what is the recent ice cream store sold for? So you have a historical track record of what percentage of revenues it would be or what multiple of owner's discretionary earnings it would be. There are rules of thumb. So it depends on the industry that you're in.
So you can basically reverse engineer it. So you can say an ice cream store sold for X amount, the 3 times EBITDA was this amount, and this is how you kind of come up with the formula and do it kind of backwards.
That's basically it. When you're talking about a small business, let's say less than $500,000, there really isn't an EBITDA calculation. You pretty much go by what they call seller's discretionary earnings, how much you, the owner, take out of the business and bring home every year, and it's usually a multiple of that. And again, it all depends on the industry. There are rules of thumb that determines what that valuation would be. If you're talking about larger businesses, when you're getting up into the multi-million-dollar ranges, then you're looking at an EBITDA analysis. Sometimes you might even want to pay for a valuation by a professional valuation company. The smaller scale ones you can usually do based on that rule of thumb valuation, and you get a pretty accurate price.
Okay, and just to define our terms, so EBITDA, I never remember what the acronym stands for. Earnings before, and then I know taxes is in there somewhere. Do you remember the acronym?
It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Okay. So it's basically your cash flow out of the business.
Okay.
How much cash is coming to you as the owner or as the company?
So do franchises, since you mentioned earlier, and to kind of wheel back to it, since franchises have kind of the operating manual in place and they've got proven track records, are they more liquid, I guess, easier to sell than non-franchise business?
It all depends on how the operating performance is. So if you're going to buy a franchise, don't naturally assume that is going to sell easily in the resale market. What you have is a prospective buyer wanting to pay for what could be an earnings stream. So just because it's a franchise doesn't mean you're going to get top dollar for it. You still have to operate the business as if it's an operating entity. You have to maximize the efficiency of the operations you run. So while, yes, there is some support, so even if you do a franchise resale, you still have the support from the franchisor in terms of all the support systems, the proven methodologies that get the business that you need, but you have to run it efficiently, and you have to make sure that you're maximizing your bottom line. There's rules of thumb for everything. They're called KPIs, key performance indicators. So depending on the industry, a certain percentage should be your net income, a certain percentage should be depreciation, a certain percentage should be payroll, and you want to keep those figures in line with what the industry averages are. That way you can command top dollar for your business.
So let's, you mentioned when we were talking offline, you wanted to talk a little bit about, executives in transition and how purchasing a business can be a good option that they might not think about rather than just finding another executive job.
So I've had experience with many executives in transition, and a lot of times what these executives want to do is find that next corporate role. Now, if you've been with a company for 20 to 30 years, let's say it's a major company like a GE, well, the likelihood of you finding another executive role with a company of that size is probably not going to happen. So you have to resort to one of two things. You have to be able to work for a smaller shop that's willing to pay for the experience that you have, but it won't have the same track that you would have had with a GE or an IBM. But the other thing that you could do is that you can invest in your own business. And you just have to ask the executives, are they willing to do their own business, buy their own business? A lot of them don't give that thought. So when I meet with executives in transition, I always ask them, have you ever thought about owning your own business? And more often than not, they say no. I said, are you aware that you could fund your business by rolling over a part of your IRA into a profit-sharing IRA with no tax consequences to fund your business? And they said, no, I didn't know that. So these are two things that I did. I never thought about owning my own business like Transworld, and someone just asked me the question, would you consider being a business advisor with Transworld? And I said, well, let me find out more information. It turns out it's almost identical to what I did in the corporate world. I'm advising business owners, not CEOs and CFOs, but business owners, to put their store in the best possible light to get the maximum valuation. And you have the flexibility of working your own hours. Now, sometimes you may have to work Saturdays and Sundays, but you might have your Friday morning off to play a little golf, which, by the way, is another way to business develop networking. I always am networking no matter what, and every opportunity I get to talk to someone could be another business opportunity for someone else. So my goal now is to talk to outplacement firms just to put this idea in their head and just see if they've given it any thought and would they consider it. More often than not, when you meet with people, you have to put an idea in place. Have you ever thought about owning your own business? If you ask the question, what are you thinking about doing next? Sometimes that's too open-ended, but if you ask a direct question, have you ever thought about owning your own business? Have you ever thought about owning a franchise, which if you do it right, chances of you succeeding are better than you starting up your own business. So I think it's a great opportunity. I'm not saying it's for everyone. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, but you're controlling your own destiny, which I think would work in a lot of cases with many executives. And usually executives may have some kind of cash to rely on, whether it be some kind of executive comp that turned into cash, or maybe their retirement income already started. So there is a cushion of cash, because normally when you start your business up, you're not going to be usually profitable in the first year, but you'll get your start to get you to where you want to be going forward. So for me, I'm my own poster child. I bought a business. I was an executive for 35 years, and now I'm a business owner, and I'm enjoying it because I'm getting to meet a lot of people here in the Naperville area, in Chicagoland. It's a fabulous opportunity for you to meet people and try to help people out too.
Well, Steve, we'll have all your info if people want to contact you and they're looking to buy or sell a business on our website, seizeyourbusiness.com.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Kevin, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.